The private banking lounge existed in a world apart from the rest of the city. Thick glass walls softened the noise from outside, turning traffic and voices into a distant hum. Inside, everything was deliberate, the low amber lighting, the faint scent of polished oak and espresso, the muted footsteps on plush carpet. This was a place designed to make people feel important without ever saying it out loud. Ayan Malik felt completely at home. He sat near the window, one leg crossed over the other, his tailored blazer resting perfectly on his shoulders. The gold watch on his wrist glinted every time he moved his hand, catching the light like it was eager to be noticed. On his phone, a financial app displayed figures that would make most people pause and stare, but to him, they were familiar companions. Profits, investments, properties, numbers that proved, again and again, that he had made it. He glanced around the lounge with quiet satisfaction. A few other clients sat scattered across the room, all dressed in the unspoken uniform of wealth, neutral colors, subtle brands, confident posture. No one spoke loudly. No one needed to. That calm rhythm broke when the glass door opened. Ayan barely looked up at first. People came and went all the time, assistants, managers, the occasional new client trying too hard to look relaxed. But something made him glance again. The woman who stepped inside didn't fit the picture. She moved slowly, not hesitantly, but carefully, as if she was aware of the room's unspoken rules without feeling the need to obey them. Her clothes were simple to the point of being forgettable, a light shawl draped over her shoulders, a modest kurta, slightly worn sneakers. No makeup that screamed confidence, no accessories announcing status. A plain canvas bag hung from her shoulder, the kind people used for groceries or books. She looked around briefly, not in awe, not intimidated, just observant. Ayan raised an eyebrow. It wasn't judgment at first, more curiosity. People like her didn't usually wander into places like this by accident. Or so he thought. She walked to the counter, where a young teller greeted her with a professional smile. "Yes, ma'am, how may I help you today?" The woman returned the smile, soft and polite. "I just want to see my balance." Her voice was calm, no rush, no nervous laughter. Ayan's lips twitched. Of all the things she could have said, that was it. He leaned back in his chair, lowering his phone slightly, pretending to scroll while listening closely. The request felt almost innocent, like asking for directions. In this lounge, people usually asked about portfolios, private transfers, international holdings. Balance checks were for ATMs and mobile apps. The teller nodded, though a flicker of hesitation crossed her face. "Of course. May I have your card, please?" The woman reached into her bag and handed it over without ceremony. Ayan let out a small chuckle before he could stop himself. It wasn't loud at first, but in the quiet lounge, it carried. He shook his head, amused by the situation, by the contrast between the setting and the request. He told himself he wasn't being rude. Just realistic. "Balance," he said, loud enough now, his tone smooth but edged with humor. "You know this is the private lounge, right?" The woman turned slightly, her gaze settling on him. Her eyes were steady, dark, and unreadable. "Yes," she replied simply. Ayan smiled, the kind of smile that usually made people laugh along with him. "There's usually a minimum requirement to even sit here. Maybe the regular branch downstairs would be more convenient." A few heads subtly turned. No one openly stared, but the energy in the room shifted. This was entertainment, quiet, socially acceptable entertainment. The woman didn't blush. She didn't argue. She didn't apologize. "I won't take long," she said. Something about the way she said it, so assured, so unconcerned, made Ayan's smile falter for half a second. He brushed it off quickly. "That's what everyone says," he replied lightly. "Until they realize they walked into the wrong world." The teller cleared her throat softly, eyes flicking between them. She began typing, the sound of the keyboard unnaturally loud. The woman rested her hands on the counter, fingers relaxed. She seemed entirely unaffected by the attention, by the quiet judgment that hung in the air. Ayan studied her more closely now. There was nothing flashy about her, but there was also nothing small. Her posture was straight, her movements unhurried. She didn't shrink under his gaze. If anything, she looked like someone waiting patiently for a bus, not approval. He told himself it was confidence born from ignorance. People who didn't know the rules often felt bold. The teller stopped typing. She frowned at the screen. Then she leaned closer, adjusting her glasses, typing again as if correcting a mistake. Her brows drew together. Her lips parted slightly. Ayan noticed the change immediately. He sat up a little, interest replacing amusement. Teller reactions were usually predictable, polite smiles, rehearsed lines. This was different. The teller looked up at the woman, then back at the screen. She straightened her back, shoulders suddenly stiff. "Ma'am," she said carefully, her tone no longer casual, "would you like your balance displayed privately, or on the main screen?" The room went still. Aeon's chuckle died in his throat. He stared at the teller, then at the woman, trying to process what he'd just heard. That question wasn't standard. It wasn't asked unless the numbers were significant. The woman considered it for a brief moment, as if deciding between tea or coffee. "The screen is fine," she said. Aeon felt something tighten in his chest. The teller nodded slowly, fingers hovering over the keyboard. And for the first time since the woman had walked in, Aeon wasn't smiling. The faint hum of the air conditioning suddenly felt loud, intrusive, as if the room itself had become aware that something important was about to happen. Aeon leaned forward without realizing it, his elbows resting on his knees, his phone forgotten in his hand. Across the lounge, a few other clients subtly shifted in their seats. No one spoke. No one even pretended not to watch. The teller inhaled, steadying herself, then turned slightly toward the large digital screen mounted behind the counter. Her fingers moved again, slower this time, deliberate. The soft clicking of keys echoed like footsteps in a hallway before a verdict. The screen blinked. For a split second, it was blank. Then the numbers appeared. They stretched wider than Aeon expected, rows of digits aligned with cold precision. Commas broke them into neat sections, but even with that mercy, the figure was overwhelming. It wasn't the kind of number people talked about casually. It wasn't the kind of number that fit into jokes or comparisons. It was the kind of number that changed the temperature of a room. Aeon's breath stalled halfway in his chest. His eyes scanned the screen once, then again, as if his mind refused to accept what it was seeing. He counted the commas instinctively, the way people do when they're hoping they've misread something. He hadn't. A low murmur rippled through the lounge, quickly smothered into silence. One man near the far wall lowered his newspaper. Another client's hand froze mid-stir over a porcelain cup. Even the security guard near the door straightened slightly, eyes fixed on the glowing display. The teller spoke, her voice steady but edged with unmistakable respect. "Your total balance is confirmed, ma'am." The woman didn't react the way Aeon expected. There was no smile of triumph, no flicker of pride. She simply nodded, as though the screen had shown her the weather. "Thank you," she said. "I just needed to check." Just needed to check. The words echoed in Aeon's head, absurd in their simplicity. His own balance checks had always come with a quiet thrill, a private reassurance of control. This was on an entirely different scale. "That can't be right," he heard himself say. The words slipped out before he could stop them. His voice sounded strange to his own ears, thinner than usual, stripped of its confidence. A few heads turned toward him. The woman looked at him then, fully, for the first time. There was no sharpness in her gaze, no satisfaction. Only calm. "No mistake," she replied. "I don't come here often." Aeon stood abruptly, the legs of his chair scraping softly against the carpet. He didn't care. His heart was beating too fast, his thoughts tumbling over each other. "But," he gestured vaguely toward the screen. "That kind of balance, people like you usually." "Usually what?" she asked gently. He faltered. "Usually dressed differently. Usually announced themselves. Usually didn't ask to see their balance like it was spare change." She saved him from finishing the sentence. "I prefer living simply." The words landed heavier than any insult could have. Simply. As if the wealth displayed behind her was incidental, not identity-defining. The bank manager emerged from a side office, his expression already polished into a smile that strained at the edges. He moved quickly, hands clasped, bowing his head slightly as he approached her. "Ma'am," he said, voice warm, almost reverent. "We apologize for any inconvenience. Please let us know if there is anything at all you require, refreshments, a private room, assistance with your accounts." She raised a hand politely. "No, thank you. I'm done." The manager blinked, clearly unprepared for refusal. "At least allow us to." "I really am done," she said again, kindly but firmly. She took her card back from the teller, slipped it into her canvas bag, and turned toward the exit. The lounge seemed to hold its breath as she walked, her footsteps unhurried, unremarkable, the same as when she had entered. Aeon felt a pressure in his chest that had nothing to do with money. He watched her reach the door, panic flaring unexpectedly. "Wait," he said. She paused, hand resting lightly on the door handle, and looked back. "I'm sorry," he said. The apology tasted unfamiliar, but honest. I judged you. There it was. Stripped bare. No excuses, no humor to hide behind. She studied him for a moment, as if deciding whether the words deserved acknowledgement. Most people do, she said. That's why I let them laugh. The door opened quietly behind her, letting in a brief wash of street noise and daylight. Then it closed, and she was gone. The screen behind the counter dimmed, returning to its neutral display. The lounge exhaled. Conversations slowly resumed, but they were softer now, cautious, as though everyone had been reminded of something uncomfortable. Aeon sank back into his chair. The gold watch on his wrist felt heavier than before. He glanced at his phone, at the numbers he'd been so proud of just minutes earlier. They hadn't changed, but his relationship with them had. For years, he had believed wealth announced itself. That it wore certain clothes, spoke a certain way, occupied certain spaces. He had laughed because the rules made sense to him. They had always worked in his favor. Until they hadn't. He looked toward the door again, half expecting the woman to return, to say something else, something final, something sharp. But she didn't. She had already moved on, back into a world where she didn't need to prove anything. Around him, the lounge slowly returned to normal. But for Aeon, something fundamental had shifted. The balance he couldn't stop thinking about wasn't the one on the screen. It was the quiet realization of how easily confidence turned into arrogance, and how invisible true power could be when it chose to be.